Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. My name's Nick, and we have a very, very special guest, a person who's really special to both myself and to Kisma. Sheevaun Moran is coming on to talk about spirituality in business.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
Well, hello, Nick.
Hello, Kisma.
What's going on there?
Whew, just getting back in the groove.
Yeah, we both had a big couple of weeks, right?
It's been a lot, yes, with the travel and then a retreat. And then I also just was part of a 4-day Energy Mastery core training at the brand new center. So that's
so
really
excited
really
to talk
exciting.
About that with Sheevaun.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, I just don't even know how cool it's going to be yet, but it's already off to an amazing start. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and a big shout out to our retreat people from up north Michigan who might very well be listening in. That was just a special weekend.
Absolutely.
I think that was our 10th retreat that we've done at Niatawanta.
10th time up there. And for the last several, you've said, oh, no, this is the last one. And then as soon as we were done with this one, you're taking enrollments for
it's
next
already
year.
half full.
Yeah. So looks like we're going back, which is super exciting because it's such a beautiful time of year to be there. The fall
perfect.
colors and I mean, everything that was going on was just, it was a really, really, it's always a really special weekend. And
just great.
Yeah, really fun. What's been going on with you?
Oh, same thing, back from the retreat, getting back into the flow, working with clients, creating some new content, all good stuff at Illumination Academy.
What's the thing you're most excited about right now?
The thing I'm most excited about is just the opportunity for dusting off anything that remains by the end of the year and preparing for 2018.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's super exciting.
Dusting off,
shaking it off.
All right. Well, that's exciting. Today is a really special podcast for us. Yeah. Sheevaun Moran is somebody who's, I think, very special to each of us in her own unique way, for sure. And as far as, just my personal relationship of, really, she's been such a pivotal teacher for me. You hear us talk on the podcast all the time about energy mastery and all the things that, are happening there. And Sheevaun's the one who developed Energy Mastery and created this. So that's really exciting.
It is.
But then there's this whole other side of her. So there's this super woo side of her, and I can't wait to talk about both sides because she's one of the few people that I know who can actually bring together this like super woo and talk. I mean, tell me, like she can out woo just about anybody, and to really bring that into practical everyday life and especially business. Like she's built multiple businesses to a really high degree.
Exactly.
And so I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. But what about
Well, I
you?
know. I mean, we've been trying to get her on for a long time. I might say that she can out-woo in the right woo way.
That is absolutely
Yeah, we
true.
need to clarify. There is a right way to woo. Sheevaun was just a great coach to us for so long and an amazing teacher to both of us. I think we should just dive right in.
I think we should.
Okay.
So welcome to the podcast, Sheevaun.
Wow, thanks for that introduction. Thanks, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to have you. I don't even know where to start with this.
Yeah, there's so much. This would be a 5-hour podcast.
Yeah,
and we won't do that.
There's times, just so everybody on the show knows, there's times when we'll catch Sheevaun and just kind of sit her down and like basically corner her and just start asking her all of our weird questions. And so this is not going to be one of those conversations.
You never know.
But I think what I'd like to talk about a little bit just to get started is if you could share with everybody a little bit about Epic Life. Like, I'd love to hear a little bit about what that's about and how you came to really bring spiritual components into business building.
So I had been teaching energy healing, energy medicine, energy mastery for a long time. I'd had centers, and I had them in a couple states, and I was certifying teachers and so on and so forth. And then I got really hooked into a whole bunch of clients who wanted me to help them build their business, like into big businesses. And I love that. I love that a lot. And then my assistant at the time was always getting me to go into different things. So she signed me up for this little event, and there was a woman speaking at the front, and she was super direct and very businessy, and all of this internet marketing and building businesses in a way to make a difference, but only in money. That was her only gig. And at the end, I was like, oh, that's really nice. And I met her in the hall, and she, in her wonderful, amazing sales way, said I needed to work with her. And I said, no, actually, your energy's a mess, and you'd have to work with me first. And so it really got me to start on this journey of looking at what was being offered in the world and realizing that I'd been teaching in what I call my other planet, and away from other teachings, away from, I hadn't gone to events or really done anything. I created what I created without having any understanding that other people were out there doing these other things. And then people would come into my trainings or my one-on-one programs, and I'd have to fix them from all of the other wonky stuff that they get, like the weird woo stuff and like the upside down money beliefs, and working with their partner and their spouse in a weird way and creating more friction than was necessary. So I'd end up fixing them. And once I met her and I went to a couple of her things to watch her and help her sort out her energetics and, more importantly, her money, I looked at what they weren't sharing, and I got pretty frustrated and upset that people were totally being given just like a tenth of the equation. I was like, oh my gosh. So what I started was a conference twice a year, and I just decided I was going to bring the two together, business building, energy practices, and the spiritual piece, because that's really what people had been coming to me for anyway. And I might as well do it in a way that it was going to give them the tools right there in the room over the 3 days, and not just string it along like, oh, you can only get them after you do this and this. Well, you got to show up in the room and then you get them. That's the only way you get them. But that was my biggest desire, is to give the tools I have to the folks right in the room and not have to have them wait. So like as soon as they walked out of that room of that week, they would walk away with tools instantly, sometimes even before they walked out of the room of the first day, and be able to use them immediately. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. I love that. So Sheevaun, when you mentioned that you were watching people and observing and noticing what was not being given, would you say it's because most trainers or speakers, or however we would refer to this expert industry, they don't know, like they haven't actually experienced these sort of energetic technologies themselves?
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is the second person that I met in that kind of transformation world was got to hang out with Jack Canfield for a weekend, and I was like, what are these people doing? They're teaching all of this upside down stuff that's actually messing with people's money, and they don't know it. And they're teaching it because they've learned it from someone who's learned it from someone who's learned it from someone. But you have to, I'm a scientist at heart, so I like to validate to see if it's going to mess with my financial circumstances, because the one thing that gives us freedom on the planet is our financial circumstances. And if we blend the highest of who we are with good financial resources and make sure that we have the two of parts of ourselves really working together, it's amazing. So I actually worked on the guy because he was going through something pretty traumatic at the thing that I attended, and Jack Canfield. And so he had some giant back thing for a long, long time. And I just did one of my little energy mastery things. And he didn't really make anything about it. But what they started to do is teach this weird thing about heart and give everything away and la la. And maybe that's right for people who are greedy, but for most of the people on the planet, they're actually not greedy. They're afraid to get a little greedy in order to get what they're here to have. So it's about really bringing equilibrium to the people who are out there doing the work in the trenches.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up. And what I've noticed is that you seem to have a gift for developing systems around that, where a lot of times in different programs, like there's kind of a system, but it's just like, it's sort of all over the map. It's like, here's a little piece of this and here's a little piece of that. But in yours, you've really brought it together in really like a step-by-step kind of way to set those energetics up, and to get the teachings right side up and to set the energetics up in the right way so that everything starts to really flow more naturally. Is that one of your just innate superpowers, or like, how did you develop that?
I would say that probably came because I learned to be a computer programmer when I was a teenager, and it made me think in a very specific way. It made me think in blocks, and it made me think in a way of an outcome. And I think when you're trained like that, I call it a scientist, because I was studying computer science, and now it's a whole different way of being termed now, but it really was a science. And so I think that really set the whole stage so that I could take this energy thing, because no matter what I've done in this practice of bringing business and spirituality and money and health and relationship and bringing all these together into one umbrella, was really under energy, because that's what I was most sensitive to. And that's the thing that shifted my world after when I was in corporate, got sick and misdiagnosed and nearly died. And, I learned to heal myself because I had those tools within me. And then I started putting it together of, well, okay, so how do I want to do this? And how did I do this in a really kind of unconsciously competent way? And so I don't know if you'd say that that's a superpower, but I would say that I definitely had the building blocks along the way to make sure it became a superpower.
Yeah, I'd qualify. I'd say that's a superpower.
But is this not a superpower that everyone has access to? It's just a matter if they actually learn. Of course, possibly to different degrees and levels, but everyone has an energetic being, right? So to be able to solve what's going on either in them or their business, which is an energetic entity itself.
Yeah, so we all have it to some degree, but the challenge is we have learned from school how not to use it. And I was a little bit of a rebel, and I decided to not play much of the school game the way everybody wanted to play school. And we have to unlearn what we learned so we can get back to what our innate, truest, highest being is. And we also have to understand that energy is the essence of who we are, whether we believe it, whether we understand it, whether we really have any concept of it. At the core of it, we just all have it. So if we all breathe, which we do, we all have it. Now, what do we do to take that and implement those steps into our day in and day out world so it becomes a productive resource as opposed to, adrenal fatigue and, monetary challenge, right?
Totally.
Well, that kind of brings up to another topic, and something that I always thought was really interesting is about creating a sustainability, and how I can only speak for myself, like the way that I learned to create things in the world was just to basically drive myself until I couldn't. And then something somewhere along the way would break. And I think probably one of the things that has been most fascinating to me is how many layers there are of that to really unwind. And I don't know if that's just me, Sheevaun, or if that's humanity of really having that much buildup.
Or is it what, as she just said, we've been taught, our kind of conditioned layer?
Well, that's what I mean, is like how many layers of that were conditioned for me to be like, woof, man, I got to unwind that one. And then you drive, and it's like, ooh, and every time I kind of catch myself a little bit more before crashing, which is always a good thing. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just a more sustainable model and how that might look or feel in people's lives that might be really different from what they're experiencing right now.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I'm thinking of a couple stories along my life that I think will help. One of them was when my dad came to me when I was in college, and he said, I'm not happy with my life. I want to make sure that you do whatever it is that your heart desires and make sure that you're happy no matter what. Mm-hmm. Make sure that if all you do is ever be happy, then I'm happy that you're happy. And that was a pivotal moment. And I was like, okay, fine. And then, of course, probably about 12 months later, I left college. So right, a little telling. And then the other one was after I was married and my husband died suddenly, and it really put me into a big tailspin. But the thing that I remember at the moment when they told me he died, and this is a very distinct memory, while I'm sinking into a puddle of tears and all the other stuff, but the one memory that comes to me was don't sweat the small stuff. Everything is small stuff, and it just doesn't matter. And I remember him saying that a lot. And after he left, I was like, all bets are off. Life's too freaking short. There's got to be a simpler way.
Yeah.
And it's not like I was working harder, but because I was definitely working smarter always than others, because I didn't have to work the same long hours, but those just really amplified it.
And from the point or the time when your husband left the planet, when did you begin to really tap into the energetic tools? Or, I mean, I know that these gifts, and you were aware of them, have been present since you were a little girl, but when did you bring him back to the forefront?
Pretty much as soon as he left and I was bedridden. I remember doing this one prayer. It was the only prayer I knew. I just did it nonstop, 24/7, because there were so many things going wrong after he died, and all of the other things that were happening in my family, and lots of people coming to help, but all kinds of wonky things. Humans do weird things whenever somebody dies. Yeah. And I just remember just doing this prayer again, like 24/7, like didn't matter. I was just doing this prayer again and again and again. And I come to find out about a year or two later that is like one of the prayers that totally changes your energetics to make you available. The other piece was one of my dad's best friends said, now is the time. And I remember her exact words. It's so weird. He wanted me to talk to her, didn't know why. And she was like, now is the time when all of what you're here to do is going to show up. So just say yes to everything. I was like, okay, sounds like plan. In my head, that's what it sounded like. And so those pretty much collided all together at the same time.
Yeah. It's like a cosmic integration.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay, then just to play maybe devil's advocate here, though, because I've definitely been in that mode of saying yes, yes, yes to like everything. And then all of a sudden, like I feel really overwhelmed, or there's just way too much going on that's not really getting me to where I want to go. So where does the sense of discernment come in around that?
Yeah. So yes to everything and yes to being aligned are two different things. So my yes to everything that she recommended was if somebody calls you at 3:00 in the morning, you're up and you answer the phone and invite you to breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever, you say yes, you go. Somebody decides to fly you across the world, you say yes, you go. And it's really important to understand that most people decide and have little discernment about their decision making. They say yes to the secondary or tertiary or thereafter things. So I was saying yes to the first thing, meaning generally that first within it's 5 milliseconds. It's fascinating. Within 5 milliseconds, You're given the idea. Your soul drops this little idea into your brain and gives you the opportunity to like go with it. And then your personality and all the things you learn starts to step in to try to get you to not do it.
Exactly.
And I was in the yes to the 5 milliseconds.
Okay.
Now, I think that can be really scary because that happens fast. And like, that's a very fast yes to follow through. And you're so right about that. Like then all the things come in after that. Of like, no, you couldn't possibly. No. Just all sorts of ways that it can't work. How can people, or what can they do to develop a better sense of trust in that first 5 milliseconds?
Well, you have to, it's just like trust is a muscle because generally we are not worthy of ourselves and to our own word.
Oh.
So start with yourself.
There's that part.
Right? So if we start with a couple little things, like I'm going to put my keys down in the same spot every day so I don't lose them or forget or misunderstand or blame or shame, whatever, somebody else. If you take something as super tiny as that and it's never going to change, or you always put the toilet paper a particular way, right? It sounds silly.
No, but it makes sense.
But it's like start honoring those little tiny things and say, okay, I'm going to build this muscle because you have to create self-integrity and trust before you can allow those bigger things that come in to trust and accept that they're trustworthy, because we've so screwed up our own trustworthiness that we start with our basics.
So it's like one develops this muscle of getting to know their rhythm, their internal being, to the point where they just know it's a yes or it's not a yes.
I mean, there's an important thing that happens that we actually always know it's a yes, and then when it comes to putting money onto it, that's when things get really, really interesting because we have an assumption of a billion things that we need to do or make or have or happen or whatever before we can really, truly do the yes. And the highest truth in the land of all energy is if we are given that inspiration and we take action on that, yes, everything is there so long as we continue to say yes to that initial one and we don't back down. Because the challenge is we do little back downs along the way of, no, I can't do it until then. No, I can't do it until this. I can't do it until that. And it's like, yeah, that's really not what that was meant to be.
Right. And that, would you say those back downs are things that have been shown to us that we've learned and that just become part of the mind wandering and doubting?
I'll give you a great example. Somebody who's come into my world from a couple that I have worked with off and on over the course of years, and they have an amazing relationship. But they were telling this person that they pretty much had a really poopy relationship, and they were in big trouble financially in every way there was. And then they did some work with me. And this woman was like, I have to work with you. And then we had a conversation and it was like, okay, here's the investment. And now what she's done is she's gone and said yes to all kinds of other investments. And she's only getting about 1/10 of what she would have had she said yes, had she really married that idea within the 5 milliseconds.
Got it. That makes sense.
Well, it's so easy. It's almost like an addiction sometimes. I don't want to go off on a huge tangent here, but where you get that first yes in and you're like, oh, like that feels so good to take a really positive step. But then there's all these other, well, oh yeah, I'll say yes to that. I'll say yes to that. And then before you know it, you're scattered again in a million different directions.
But it's like she said, it's yes to alignment.
Yes to, and that's what I wanted to come back to. That was the best. Like that made so much sense of just, it's saying yes to what's aligned. And that does kind of require that more clear discernment or a little bit reining in of the mind so that it doesn't go in so many directions. Fascinating.
And I don't think you have to rein the mind in. I just think really you have to say more yeses to the original plan, the original idea, the original thing. And that's not a reining in. It's just saying yes to that original thing.
Like the ideal. I kind of want to move this because you guys, well, Sheevaun, you said yes to something really big in San Clemente, and I've been watching you and Nick work super hard with, not hard's the wrong word, you've been so focused and aligned with building the Energy Mastery Center. And that was a big yes for you. So would you speak a little bit about this new center that you acquired and what it took for you to just say yes, knowing it was so like your soul was so yes, and you did everything in your power to make it happen?
This is going to be our first 4-hour podcast, by the way.
Okay. So here's something fascinating. Nick and I had looked at places and spaces, because really when you have a school, in my humble opinion, it's a good idea to have an anchor location. And so we looked, and my brain was always like, yep, it's got to be San Clemente. Didn't know why, but it just needed to be San Clemente. I looked at a bunch of spaces. We kind of settled on one, and then the investment to fix it was kind of high, and it was like nice and fine, but it wasn't awesome. And I'd been watching this one little property for a while, off and on, for about 2 or 3 years. All of a sudden, they dropped the price like $100,000, and I was like, get a realtor. Let's make this happen. And I said yes to it. And generally what I've had experiences with the buying properties is like, yes, it goes here, it goes there, does this, and then boom, done, next. Well, that wasn't the case with this little school center. It was a yes, and there were, I think we counted over 100 people that had to help me really get it to fulfilled fruition, because at every turn, at really every turn, every call, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, in order to prevent me from really, really finalizing that and actually owning that property. I had people tell me it was impossible. I had people tell me they're going to do the loan and then they would just disappear. It just so many things. I had tax liens. I had all kinds of IRS things. I had, oh my goodness, just like so many issues. A misunderstanding of the valuation, and it just goes on. And alone with the IRS and dealing with what they kept telling me was impossible to fix, 100 of my personal hours I spoke with the IRS in order to get it to be resolved within the time frame we needed it to resolve. So the really fascinating thing is, I had a couple of people along the way say, oh, it's the universe. And I was like, no. This is my world. This is exactly what I'm here to do. This is exactly right. This is what's supposed to happen. I had a bunch of people saying, oh, I can't get the money for you. Oh, this isn't going to happen. Oh, blah, 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 blah. But the truth of it was that every moment I stayed in that yes, in that 100% knowing that this is what is going to happen, and all of the people that are in my world are going to figure out how to help me. And there are so many. It's just amazing how many people rallied. And of course, I had to fly across the country a couple of times in order to get some of those people to rally for me. But it's like, will you do what it takes for your truest, highest yes? And most people don't. And that's always sad.
I see a lot of people stopping. And I know it's something we talk a lot about with our clients and students, but my question for you, it's so unusual for you to have so many bumps, if you want to call them that. Why do you think that occurred? Like, is it because it's already flourishing, right? You guys already had your first 4-day training, but why this center, and why all of the hiccups?
There's so many, we could speculate for a long time, but I think there are so many pieces to it of, it's a special building, it's a special location, and it had been kind of just gosh, I would say it was an abused building, and I would also say that it was actually a bigger vision than what we had originally, to say, all right, well, we want to anchor it in a space, and this is kind of the space. This is kind of the space we need. So buying something was a little ahead of schedule, and so. And also with this school, and you're talking about energy and advanced trainings that are, you're dealing with the energetics that could help, the planet, right? That's what all of my centers have done. And I've rented them all before, and they've all been amazing. And it's so cool to see all the businesses around them flourishing from the places I've had. And but owning something that's really going to be an anchor, I think, is a slightly different adventure. And it could be that it's a little ahead of its schedule, but it's perfectly on time. It just means a commitment. And of course, the dollars. There's something funny that you guys have heard me teach is it's easier to get $10 million than it is to get $1 million. Yeah. And that is actually true.
My brain has a little hard time understanding that.
Right? And it's really funny how many people said, I could get this for you if it were $10 million. But it's just because it's $1 million, it's really hard.
It's so funny.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny how that really turns into something that is like, oh yeah, I could see that, because it's a smaller amount. And while most of our brains don't grasp that, the truth of working in energy is it's not about $1 million as the dollars per se. It's about how many lives and souls are really going to shift because of what has already gotten anchored by making that. Yes.
Right.
Now that's been a really interesting transition for me is from a focus on the dollars to the focus on the souls. Like, I relate to that better. Now, that obviously doesn't give me permission to neglect the dollars. I totally get that part of it. But I think, I think some of our listeners would get that piece of like, wow, when it's just about dollars and cents, that's just not exciting to them. And it's really easy for them to not, get fired up or not really like be fully engaged with it when it's about that. But when it's about helping people or working with people, especially at a soul level, on those sorts of things, I think that makes a world of difference. Would you agree with that, or is it different temperaments of people that relate to that in different ways? Like, what do you think about that?
I'm not quite sure your question. It sounds like a statement. Yeah. So help me.
So are there people who are just more bent around the dollars and cents, they get fired up around that and just go that direction? And are there people that are just more centered on just doing soul work? And what are the challenges with people who are just centered on helping people and helping souls?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see. So it wasn't until I found somebody who really got that two things. One of the lenders looked at my website and looked at all of my videos. I have over 200 videos, and they said they watched every single video, and they were on board and they were ready to do whatever it took. And it wasn't until we really had that in place that it was really that was the perfect alignment, the ideal alignment. Mm-hmm. Now, most people who deal in souls really get into the misunderstanding that if you're going to help souls, that you really shouldn't need dollars. And the highest, most elevated, most advanced teachers who have ever come before all of us, really had a great sense of good wealth, good health, and making sure that they could communicate so that the students could learn, and they're not just regurgitating stuff, so that they could communicate in a way that it would help the students learn from their own perspective. Mm-hmm. So dollars and cents and souls must combine, or else, really, if you really think about it, if somebody is just doing a whole bunch of work on souls and their health is a wreck, they're actually going to transmit that energy to somebody that they're doing work with, mm-hmm. right? That's not good. That's not the highest vibration, and that's also going to help blight in that place in that kind of teaching, right? Mm-hmm. So it behooves a teacher, somebody who is going to help us all, it behooves them to learn how to monetize. It behooves them to learn how money really does work. And it really is a different way of understanding breath and energy. But there aren't that many people who teach the money and energy piece as it truly, really is designed to be taught. Not just money is energy. Woo, yeah, we get it, but we don't really get it if we're not making the income we truly want.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like how you take it a step further from that's a nice thing to have a successful business helping people to really making it your responsibility to have a successful business helping people, to have the money be a part of that. Like that's actually, that makes a lot more sense. And I think it helps to anchor the mind in that sense of, like this isn't just a luxury or a nice thing to have. This is actually really necessary for the full transformation to take place.
I have a question. It really stemmed from, again, watching the center flourish and watching you do all your magic. I mean, for those of you that make your way to the center, it's so beautiful. And when it was first acquired, it was beautiful in a different way. And Sheevaun's one of the few people that can walk in and see it, like see the after version before there's any paint on the wall. So it's just so fun to watch that like blossom like a baby. And it took me back to when I had my yoga studio in Michigan, and it was really easy for me to love all over this studio because it was tangible. There were people walking in and out, like I could feel it as an energetic presence. And what I found, and I know it's something you and I talked about, but opening a business online, something that we work at from our home or our office that doesn't have this brick and mortar, I feel sometimes it's more tricky for people to love on it in the same way as if it were a business. So I'm wondering if you could share some tips for those of us that are in the online world or perhaps don't have a brick and mortar, but we have a business, and how to treat that business as the energetic entity that it is.
Yeah, great question. So it's easy for me because I really think of energy first. So it's like when I think of an email list, I don't think of them as names and emails. I think of, okay, there's a little light at the end of this, and I can see their little lights. And what are their little lights doing? Right? This is what my little wacky brain of how it looks and thinks. But what do those little lights need, and what's going on in the world that is totally trying to stamp out their lights? That's not okay. What can I do to help their little lights be brighter and shinier, and really anchor that all the way down into the financial piece? So it's really like taking that concept and taking it out of the etheric, kind of, it's not real, it's just online. Taking that and really saying there is a soul, there is a human attached to each and every one of these applications, each and every one of these emails, each and every one of these phone numbers. And they have stepped into our worlds because they're looking for something. And it could be 1 week, 1 day, 1 month, 1 year. I mean, even our last epic event, there was a woman who had been following me for 7 years. She said, I've read every single email you've sent. I read and listen and watch everything you send. And I decided to come to this epic. I was like, wow, 7 years. Holy smokes. What was I doing 7 years ago? That's pretty wild, right? So there are people that come into our world that are looking for something that they know we have. They just don't know exactly what it is. And it could take them a while to get to their little 5 milliseconds coming back into alignment. Because generally they've said yes in the 5 milliseconds, and then they've come on the list. Is okay, that's really cool, but our expectation based upon internet marketing is, it should be a conversion and it should happen really fast. Well, when you're talking about souls and money and business and relationships and health, and you're talking about that whole package all as one, it isn't a common conversation. Most people are just talking about like something I watched today of, I got $500,000 from like people subscribing from my little like LinkedIn and my little system, and I was like, that's really cute. and I wasn't watching it; I was listening to it. I was doing something else, and he was just like, all you have to do is send an email that talks about Facebook marketing like this. And I was like, but that is so not who I would ever do. I would never be like that just to get $500,000. But I can do it in a way that is authentic to me and the soul who has said yes to something that's going on in their world that is a resonance. And so you have to really think of it. There's a human there that is attached to that. And if you don't, otherwise you will, you won't take it seriously. And there's a different way of thinking about marketing for a tangible physical space than there is marketing for a space that doesn't have a tangible physical space.
Well, it seems like you almost have to be even more clear with your energetic container for that entity if it's an online business, in order to really to keep it keep it as a place for where people can really come and keep coming back to.
Well, one of the things that's really fascinating, and you can see the internet marketers that have been around a while, you can see them getting into this, as gradually and better at it. But from the beginning, I was always like, I'm just going to communicate from my heart, and I'm not going to share anything unless it's really from my heart and the truest part of who I am. And, you can try to make me market all these other ways, but at the end of the day, there are people's lives at stake in my world. According to me, that's the way I think. There are people's lives at stake. Their healths are at stake. Their souls are at stake. Their finances are at stake. Their soul advancement is at stake. So I better do my very best to have my energy and my container cleaned up before I'm going to send that email, before I'm going to write it, and make sure that it really, and who cares about typos? Fine. It's not the typo that's the thing. It's the energy.
That makes a world of difference.
Yeah, can't be writing emails while one is angry, that's for sure.
I've tried that.
Won't work so well.
Usually doesn't go so well for me.
How many of those have you been sending, Nick?
It's been a while. Yeah. Of course they do. And even if all my, but then I know, like, I've caught myself in the past, just to use myself as an example, where I've sent it and I've said all the right words. There's nothing in that email that you can really argue with, but I'm a little agitated when I send it, and sure enough, there's something that comes back that really reflects that. And that's the wake up for me of like, yep, I when I look at that, there's nothing in there that really speaks to that directly, but it's all over it. So it just makes a world of difference. Put your left hand on your heart, breathe.
Type with your right hand.
Type with right hand if you have to, and send that email the right way.
And, here's something that's funny, because we put an email out the other day about zombies. And the only reason we put it out is because I was speaking at an event, and I went out for lunch, and there was a zombie walk. Right in like the whole downtown of Denver, and I was like, what the heck?
I didn't know that was a thing.
Thousands of people dressed. I didn't either. Thousands of people dressed as zombies, like babies in their little carrier things, like all made up as a zombie. It was just over zombied. And I was like, oh my God, this is so bizarre. I've never seen anything like this. And, I wasn't bothered, but I was just like, wow, that's pretty weird. Okay, let me stay out of your little zombie ways. And so I wrote an email about zombies. And the fascinating thing is the people who unsubscribed were just like, oh, I don't want to know anything about zombies. But the email didn't have anything to do with zombies. They read the energy of it to open it. And then they decided, because of the word, so they didn't listen to their 5 milliseconds, because there was actually 3 massive teachings in the email. Kind of fun. But people really getting in their heads around what is that? Because they knew the energy was right, but they were then in the personality and oh no, that can't be. There can't be anything in here because of this weird word that I would hardly ever say.
So funny.
Right.
It's a fascinating study in the human psychology.
Well, it comes back to that 5 milliseconds, and that it's your brain, I think, doesn't always know how to comprehend that. And then all the things that come in around that to say, to say no, or to get yourself out of that, or it just doesn't show up the way that you think it's going to show up. It looks totally different, or there's other words around it, and it's like, oh, well, that couldn't possibly be it. But what's funny about that is then that even that continues to erode that self-trust, because like, oh, I must have been wrong to even open it. Fascinating.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I would love for you two to speak a bit more about energy mastery. What is coming up with this special school of awesomeness?
Where to start?
Where to start?
Oh my goodness. Geez, I think what it gives us the opportunity to do is so we have a couple levels. We have the place where both you and a bunch of very special folks said yes, because I would try not to ever teach this stuff again. And there's a course called The Core, and it's 4 days, and it's like 40 hours, and it's pretty intense. And it allows that to be something even more sacred, but it also takes the next level down of, okay, there's a foundations level of beginners, which is super important. I mean, really basics that are going to save somebody's life and practice and their health in their practice, etc., and help them flourish in ways that they can't even possibly fathom. But in all ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, financially, it gives us the opportunity to hold special meditations. It gives us the opportunity to. I was putting down a list this morning in one of our Trello boards of all of the ideas that are different ideas or things that I've taught at ad hoc or random over the years, like energetic anatomy, teaching that, teaching crystal healing, teaching, soul alchemy, all kinds of really amazing things, and have a space that it's so easy for that energy to get into the students,
right?
Where there's less friction. And I don't know exactly how far it's all going to go, but I have a sense of I can see happening, and I'm pretty stoked about it. I can't say that I've been that stoked about it. I'm generally super stoked about life, awesome, epic, but I'm probably 11 on the scale on this one. This of 10.
Well, I think too, it's for our listeners to know that we have people going through this training, either with you, Sheevaun, for the 4-day, or some of the other specialty trainings. Nick, you've got a 2-day. Other trainers like Nicole coming out there, and many others. But it's like we've had lawyers and doctors and acupuncturists and students, artists. Like, it is truly this system of energetic technology that can be used by anyone who wants to solve and resolve some of the internal issues that are reflecting in their external world or their emotional, mental, or physical health.
Yeah, that's exactly, like, the applications for it are so incredibly broad. Sheevaun, I didn't mean to cut you off there. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, Kisma, that I think the unique thing about energy mastery is as we move into a world where, they're more disconnected, like Wi-Fi. I don't mean disconnected humans, because there are kind of disconnected humans, but Wi-Fi oriented kind of things. We have to get more savvy with our our own personal energy technology. And so this center's really, and all of the things that are coming with it are really designed to help people navigate their human bodies, their mental dynamics, their soul's calling, all the different woo things that are out there, and really dispelling things that are not so helpful and giving the most advanced stuff available, so that their lives can be even that much more rich and full. It's really designed, the energy mastery is designed for more ease and grace on the path to.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, tools for travel to really.
That's great.
Yeah, that's how I think about it. It's like, wow, so many other things come up along the way, and creating a really sustainable path, because any goal, anything, just for me personally, anything I've ever set out to do that was really meaningful for me took a lot longer than I thought it would, and a lot more effort than I gave it credit to start with. And to me, in my mind, energy mastery and the tools that are taught specifically in foundations and core, but certainly in the other trainings as well, are really there to help make that path more sustainable, have it flow more easily, and to really have the confidence in yourself that no matter what comes your way, you've totally got it handled. Like Sheevaun talking about that, everything going wrong with that building. I never really saw her, and maybe there were a moment here or there, but I never really saw her in a place of, just going to pieces over it or anything like that. It was always, everything that came her way, next. And it was just so cool to see that in action.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons.
Proof in the pudding.
Yeah, I love hanging around you. I'm just going to say this publicly for all of our podcast audience too, is that I'm just so honored to be a part of Energy Mastery with you, Sheevaun. It really is just the coolest thing ever. And when I think about what I'm really here to do, man, this is the thing that just lights me up. So I hope you know that. I think you already know that, because I'm just assuming that you can already see and hear everything. But I just wanted to say that publicly.
Public display of devotion right there.
There you have it. And I don't even know how cool it's going to be. My mind is starting to churn out now some ideas of the different things that we can do in the space, and to really see what's possible.
So I have another important question for Sheevaun before we sign off, but we'll make sure there's an application, everyone, in the show notes, because to enroll in any of the Energy Mastery certifications, because of the type of energy and the high vibe that it is, just fill an application. You'll end up probably talking with Nick or someone on the team. We'll get a link for EPIC, which is coming up in December, an amazing conference, especially, like Sheevaun said, working through those financial pieces, and I can't not say it's a spiritual component. Like for me, spirituality is always alignment. So two really cool things. But Sheevaun, I have a question. We ask every guest this, and I'm curious as to your answer. But is there anything that you really want to do that you've not yet told anybody about, that's sort of on your bucket list for life?
I'd like to do the Trans-Siberian Railway.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
I just have always thought, even before I even read anything about it, I just thought that has got to be pretty diverse and pretty, all over the map. And I was like, yeah, I think that's something I would love to go out there and do in the world.
I love that. Well, there'll be a link in the show notes to register to join Sheevaun. Trans-Siberian Railway Retreat
2020, everybody.
Yeah, I'll be organizing it.
You've already got people coming with me to Tibet.
I know, right? Yeah. Which one are we going to do first? Everyone get your visas now. So
that's a really good one.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast, and I'm so excited that we got to make this happen. So really, just from me to you, thank you so much for being here.
Same here.
You know how much I appreciate you, and I am just so excited for our listeners to get a chance to experience you as well. So thank you.
Same here. And any last words for everyone, Sheevaun?
Last words. I would say that no matter what's going on in your world, one thought that you can really clean up every day and take out of your vocabulary is the word HATE. And it actually takes pollution out of the air. That's a pretty esoteric thought, but try it out, take it out of your kids' mouths, and try something else in place of it. And I hope I get to see everyone at EPIC. That would be awesome in La Jolla.
That's awesome. We'll make sure those links are in there. All right. Thank you, Sheevaun. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Kisma.
Till next time, namaste.
Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.